Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is a legend that is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, it's getting to be spooky season. We're going to be looking into the world
Oh,
of the paranormal, ghosts, schools, hauntings. How are you
you
doing?
know, yeah, I'm doing well. You can never get away from the spooky season, can we? We
No.
never can. But it is always fascinating how it all seems to sort of just pinnacle around October. But to be honest with you, it's no different than any other real time of the year for anybody that's in research and investigating. But it does fascinate me because the world of the paranormal, so it's a word that just covers so much. Be it into the side of the UFO stuff or supernatural, paranormal, demological, cryptid, you name it, it's all kind of under that banner, isn't it, really? So anybody that sort of gets into the paranormal field, should we say hauntology type stuff, it's only a matter of time before they start expanding into all these other areas because you find these connections, and that's what I love about these particular subjects. And of course, the work that Curry's done is quite variated as well, which is a good thing because you always know that, oh, yeah, you spent your time in a subject because you start to realize, oh, hang on a second, it sort of it's got its fingers in all sorts of different topics and subjects. Fascinates me all these different types of areas, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. Now, our guest this evening is a paranormal researcher, investigator, and author, Curry Stegen. So, first of all, Curry, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
Doing great, and it's great to be on with you. Thank you so much for having me.
So the pleasure's all ours. So, Corey, I think the best place to start with this is, what kind of drags you into the paranormal world? What took you from, if my research is correct, from a US Air Force Reserve officer into a paranormal researcher and investigator? Is it just an intense interest, or did you experience things yourself that made you want to investigate them? What was the journey for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marcus. I think it was a little different for me than it was for what draws most people into it. I've found that a lot of people who get involved in the paranormal do so because they've had strange experiences that they're looking for answers for. Either they've saw something, they've experienced something, maybe something strange happened to them as a child, uh, and they're looking for answers for that. And I would say, for the most part, I'm probably the minority here that come into the paranormal because I was a bit of a skeptic, I guess you could say. Um, And when I say a skeptic, I don't mean that I was an outright cynic, because a cynic is somebody who just outright denies that anything that there's anything to, say, the paranormal or whatever subject they're cynical about. Um, I was more skeptical, and the what my wife and I we started watching I don't know if you guys ever followed the Ghost Hunter show, because that was really one of the first big shows that happened here in the US. And I
Yeah.
know they eventually expanded into the UK, I believe, as
Mm.
well,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
show.
Yep.
But we used to watch that show for a while, and it I thought it was interesting, kind of their approach and how they tried to debunk things, and they kind of took a I'd say, of all the shows I ever watched, I thought that show they tried to take the most objective kind of stance on doing their investigations. So, yeah, it wasn't always exciting for TV because there were times that, they would go in and do an investigation, and they would find out, well, we really didn't find any evidence of anything happening at this location. And they'd go back to the client and tell them that. And, we started following the show, and I would get anecdotal stories from other people. They would tell me, hey, I had a weird experience when I was a kid. I had a lot of friends, family, acquaintances that would share stories with me. And uh, I would say, watching the show and hearing other people's stories, it always kind of, I guess it kind of whetted my appetite for wanting to at least explore and find out whether there was anything to the paranormal. Because to be perfectly honest, in the book, I mention a few, I don't know, I guess you could say strange things that happened when I was a kid, and I mentioned a trip we took in the cemetery
Mhm.
on our BMX bikes when we were kids, and we were up way too late at night doing things we shouldn't have been doing. You know, little things like that, but I could never anything that I did experience when I was a kid, I could never hang my hat on it and say it was paranormal. Now, the exception to that was I did see a UFO when I was a teenager.
Right.
And so it happened really quickly. It was probably, the sighting probably lasted maybe about 8, 10 seconds. And me and my friend saw this happen. We saw this craft looked like it was way up in the sky, just kind of hovering there. And then it looked like it suddenly just shot up out of the atmosphere, like at a very, very fast pace.
Mhm.
So, I always, that was always in the back of my mind, always remembering that experience. And, that is the only time I can really say that I saw a UFO, at least what I think was a UFO. And that was a strange experience. So if you want to call that in the larger sense, I know Steve just alluded to, the paranormal is really about, if you really want to get into the textbook definition, it is
Mhm.
really anything unexplained or unusual or, that we can't explain scientifically. So maybe that one little that one little experience I had where I saw the UFO, maybe at least at some level that kind of opened me up to things that were unexplainable.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, absolutely, Steve. I mean, two things to pick up on there. One, obviously we've got UFOs already thrown into the mix here, so it doesn't surprise
Always.
us. And you entered this very quite skeptical yourself, years ago. So you can probably identify with what Curry's
Well,
saying there.
well, yeah. I mean, I came into the subject as pretty much a skeptic, to be honest with you. But I think the longer you actually spend in the subject, you end up, you kind of end up in denial to some point. You kind of, when you do experience something, you're kind of thinking, well, surely not. But then sometimes it comes hitting home fast, and it did for me in 1996, after spending about 13 years already in the subject. And there was just no denying there is paranormal phenomena does actually exist. I mean, I know that there's a lot of disinformation and hoaxing and all sorts of entertainment stuff out there, but there is a real phenomenon. And not just within, what you might some people just refer to the paranormal as, poltergeists or hauntings, but so much more, really, and quirky stuff as well. And I think when you start getting into these subjects, you start to sort of be impacted with little strange things, coincidences, synchronicities, and oddities, which your eye is drawn to, and you start to realize over a period of time, can't all be coincidence, to be honest with you. It is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Curry, I mean, obviously you did start investigating, locations, hauntings, like things of that nature. So obviously, primarily you were kind of, I guess, don't want to put words in your mouth, but focused on ghosts and maybe poltergeists. But did you experience any crossover? You mentioned you saw a UFO there, but did you experience anything outside of what you might have expected to experience, such as cryptids, for example, or just something you was maybe weren't expecting?
yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, it's in terms of what I actually experienced as a paranormal investigator. Yeah, I had one or maybe a few strange, what Steve alluded to are called synchronicities.
Yeah.
That happened a couple of times, and they were situations where I just kind of scratched my head. But aside from the UFO experience I mentioned when I was a young kid, I don't know. I would say more than anything, I think, I did the podcast show for about 5 years. And the more that I did it, the more I kind of opened up, I think. And let me back up for a second because I guess
Mhm.
first I should say when I got started in this, it really started as is there anything to this? is there really anything to this? And I know a lot of people have shared stories with me, but it's the old adage, I'll believe it when it happens to me. And so I think when early on, when I started in this journey, and I talk about it a little bit in the book, I think I had kind of low expectations, to be honest with you. I was open to going out and, seeing if that there was anything to it. And I think early on, what ended up happening was I realized, wow, there does seem to be something to this. I mean, honestly, I figured I would go out and do a couple of investigations, or if you want to call them ghost hunting outings early on, at
Mm.
least before I really started doing investigating. I got invited to a little event they were having up in Brigham, it's about 30 miles north of here. And there was a paranormal group putting it on, and my wife and I, for the very first event I ever went to, and I thought, well, let's go check it out. Why not? Another friend had uh, invited us to go check it out, and so we just kind of went along for the ride. And this paranormal group was putting on the event. Really interesting location. It was well over 100 years old. It was an old mill,
Mm.
which, by the way, is burned down now. It was called the Baron Woolen Mill. And right away at that event that we went to, I had a couple of strange experiences. And, again, I thought I would just go and I would see these guys, doing their thing, and I would not be convinced, you know,
Yeah.
and maybe I would try it a few times and say, well, doesn't really seem to be much going on with this. So, from my experience, there's nothing to it. But it didn't happen that way. And that's what's so
Mm.
bizarre to me about it. It's almost surreal
Mm.
because, low expectations, really thought, well, I'll give it a try. I'll go out on a couple of outings, and then I did experience things, and things did happen. And I thought, well, all it did was, I guess, I mentioned it kind of whetted my appetite and it grew my curiosity. And I thought, well, now I'm kind of getting hooked, and now
Mm.
I'm wanting to find out more, and so it kind of just drew me in that way. Sister-in-law was working with the paranormal group, and I mentioned the event my wife and I went to. Me and my wife went to a kind of a creepy location out in the middle of nowhere. We had the guy at the event tell us about this location. It's what's left. It's all of what's left of an old mining town, Mercer, Utah. And this was an old mining town of about 5,000 people back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then it used to be a place where you could go visit a few of the old buildings that were left standing. And then a mining company came in and bought the property up and flattened what was left of the town.
Mm.
And the only thing that was left standing was an old cemetery up on it was basically up on the side of a mountain. Really unusual location for a
Mm.
cemetery. And I had heard the location mentioned a few times, and me and my wife went out there to check it out. It was an early November evening, surprisingly, probably a little bit warmer than normal for that time of year. And it really is out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we didn't see a single person out there. And then I had a few strange experiences there that night. And so, I mentioned the event, and then the little outing a few weeks later, me and my wife went to at that old Mercer cemetery. Now, I don't go trenching around in cemeteries. It's just not something I do. That, I guess, is the exception because it's not like any normal cemetery where, there's no trespassing at night or anything like that.
Mm.
The last person laid to rest there, I think, was like 1913. So a very, very old cemetery sits up on a hill. Some of the graves are just simply rock, uh,
Mm.
rock markings. That's all there is to it. And we had a couple of strange experiences there. So fast forward, about a month later, my sister-in-law, she's working with a paranormal group, and she invites me to come along with the paranormal group. And I go on as a guest. I go along as a guest on one of their investigations. And interesting location right here in Utah. Unfortunately, no longer accessible. The Gray Cliff Lodge, which is an old what it originally was an old lodge that was a kind of a summer retreat for a family, the McKay family that was from Ogden, Utah here. It was up the canyon a ways. And I went on an investigation with the team there. Another few interesting things happened there, including one of my first EVPs that I ever captured. And so, as the saying goes, I guess, I went on the investigation or a few with the group, and they ended up invited me in as a member and training. And I guess, as the saying goes, the rest is history. I just started working with the paranormal group and going on more and more investigations. And, more and more things happened. And, again, that the whole journey was in the book covers about a 10-year period of
Yeah.
all the different kinds of experiences I had along that 10-year journey.
Yeah, I
Fascinating.
mean, just we should quickly mention the book. It's Walking in the Shadows of Strangers, and you should check that out. It's a good read. I mean, I'd like to get Steve's thoughts on this as well, but before I do, Curry, I mean, something that me and Steve have spoke about this before. Like you mentioned synchronicities. You've also mentioned maybe things that happened to you when you were younger, which you maybe didn't place that much weight on at the time. So, do you find yourself, especially the more you experience, and obviously the more your mind became a little more open to this kind of thing? Did you ever look back on, the years gone by and think, that was a bit strange, actually, or did you look at things from a slightly different perspective than you perhaps did when they first happened?
Yeah, I think so. And one of them was, I mentioned in the book, we were riding around in the cemetery late at night, and it's close to midnight. And, we're just kids, being out way later than we should have been, uh, riding around in a cemetery trying to spook ourselves. And as we're getting ready to leave, we're kind of about to head out and ride our bikes back home. Just out of the blue, we started hearing a church organ playing.
Wow.
And I mean, this is like,
Mm.
probably already after midnight.
Mm.
Uh, it's pitch dark. And we didn't see a soul in the entire cemetery, of course, because you're not supposed to be in there. It's trespassing, and we were being dumb kids. But we all stopped on our bikes and just, we were just kind of dumbfounded. We're like,
Mm.
what in the heck? What in the hell's going on here? Why are we this organ playing,
Mm.
late at night? Either somebody's messing with us or there's something unusual going on. But, I kind of just wrote that off. And, you're a kid. One of the other things that Steve alluded to was this, even as I got into the paranormal and I started having experiences, um, I'd have an experience and I would, I'd get home late at night and I'd, kind of think about it. And I'd be like, wow, did that really happen? And, next day, I'm thinking back on it, I'm reflecting on it. I'm like, did that really happen, or is my mind playing tricks on me? And then you start to talk yourself out of it, you know?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're kind of thinking back on it going, I saw a shadow, but, maybe there was a logical explanation. Although at the time we tried to debunk it. And, was it a car? Was there some other logical explanation? And at the time, we tried, and that's one of the things we always tried to do in the paranormal group was uh, you know, try to find the normal before we move on to the paranormal. And so, that's one of the things that impressed me with the members of the group is they were always trying to, look for the normal explanations for things before you ever thought about jumping to whether it may be paranormal or not. But having said that, have an experience, come home, think about it a little bit, and then you're you're trying to rationalize it, and you start to go, well, maybe that didn't really happen. Maybe
Mm.
that was my mind playing tricks on me. And the next day you're doing the same thing, but then you keep going back to, but no, that really happened. And so your mind kind of plays tricks on you sometimes that way.
Oh yeah,
I mean, yeah, Steve, you spoke about this before, haven't you? I mean, in
yeah,
various levels, like whether you're trying to rationalize something or,
yeah,
so I mean, again, you can probably really understand exactly what we're
yeah.
speaking about.
I mean, there was always things you could probably rationalize during the investigations. I mean, I think I've done about 1,000 paranormal investigations since 1983 with teams. But when we started off like that, going into sort of stately homes and castles, and of course, the UK's got a very rich history, as you can imagine. Um, but it's, you've got to clear your head of the prior knowledge and expectation, because you can pretty much convince yourself you've seen something and experienced something. You kind of control your own mechanism, really. Kind of go in there in blank. And if something does happen, then, look at what evidence there is to support what you may have experienced. Singular experiences of saying, hearing something or, seeing something, it's good for you. But evidential wise, it's not good on record. It's always good to have some sort of backup, such as, was there some type of equipment that captured it, or did other people experience it, that sort of thing. And of course, we moved out of that area into conducting residential investigations, and I was curious if Curry had actually been involved in actual residential investigations. People had contacted them and said, look, we've got some strange things going on in our home and that sort of thing. Because it is a little bit of a different type of investigation when you're dealing with people or people's problems and things, And sometimes you kind of got to step it up a little gear, now and again. I was just curious if you'd done any of those, Curry, or was it just all kind of, places where you could just go and visit as a team to these different locations?
Yeah, actually, only on a couple of occasions. And we weren't really big on residential. And,
Yeah.
before I joined the group, I think they were more involved in residentials. The problem with residentials is, one, you oftentimes find that people, you go into their house, they've already got a preconceived notion about what's going on.
Yep.
Sometimes they're thinking it's something bad or it's something demonic. And it makes it tough. It really does.
Mm.
I did do one residential that was very interesting. And the reason I say it was interesting is because of the kind of responses we were getting. Some people use EMF, which are EMF devices,
Mm.
electromagnetic frequency devices, to test whether there is high EMF inside a house or a location that may be having an effect on people, whether
Yep.
it's making them feel uneasy, it's causing hallucinations, those sorts of things. But in the one location that I went to, I was in the basement alone. And I don't know if you guys have heard of a tool called the mail meter.
Hmm.
It's used by a lot of paranormal groups.
Yep.
This particular device that I had has a what's called a REM kind of pod built into it, and
Hmm.
it's got a antenna that generates its own, EMF. Uh, it generates its own electronic signal around it. Anyhow, I was asking a lot of questions with this device, and the reason why this was so interesting to me was because I had used that device on so many investigations, and I never got a thing, right? I mean, just nothing on the RAM. And here I am downstairs asking questions, all centered around who we think is this one guy who may be in the house, and about him and his wife, and about the individual who is now occupying the house. And anytime the question centered around the one individual staying in the house or around the individual we thought was haunting the house and his spouse who was no longer in the house but still alive in a rest home, I was getting, I was getting immediate responses on the device. And I recorded all of this on audio. So it was quite remarkable in just that I started changing the line of questioning away from, anything that was centered around him or the guy that
Mm.
was living in the residence. And then, the device would stop going off. And then I went back to the original line of questioning, and I was getting hits on the device again, and very, very timely responses. Ask a question, get a hit. Ask a question again, get another hit. And this went on for about, I don't know, probably a good 7 to 8 minutes. And I was
That's
getting
interesting.
responses. And then all of a sudden it just died.
Yeah.
And it was like it was gone. It was like fleeting. And like I said, I got it all on audio. And that was what was so interesting about it, because how many investigations did I do where I never got responses on that device?
Yeah.
Many, many investigations. And so that's the other thing that I thought was so interesting. Another thing that Steve talked about, that I found interesting, I went on so many different investigations, and it was that when you have something you can back up, like you have an experience, the way that, and it seems to me people seem to experience things differently.
Mm.
Some people feel cold spots. Some people feel energy spikes. The way I seem to feel it and the way my body seems to feel it is through these kind of electrostatic kind of charge, if you will.
Hmm.
The hair starts to stick up on my body. I feel this kind of static electricity kind of feeling. That's the way I seem to pick up on it.
That's
And
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so we were doing a location here in downtown Ogden. Historic 25th Street has got a lot of history going all the way back to the 1800s. It was a major rail hub. There was a lot of underground gambling, prostitution. There was bootlegging going on, all kinds of underground, crime activity going on along 25th Street. We're investigating this old hotel that's been here since the early 1900s. Got a lot of history. Again, it's right there on 25th Street. Um, the 25th Street had an old tunnel system,
Mm.
which a lot of that's been sealed off now. But me and just one other investigator were going along in what was part of that old tunnel system that goes under 25th Street, and then it just simply comes to a point where it's just sealed off. So
Yeah.
the mayor several years ago, Mayor Godfrey, had that tunnel system pretty much sealed off because they had a lot of transients and stuff
Yeah.
that just were hanging out down there. But anyways, we're walking along there, and I can only describe what felt like I walked into like a wall of energy. And it stopped me in my tracks. It pretty much stopped me dead in my tracks. And I looked over at the other investigator, female investigator. I'm like, "Do you feel anything?" And her responses to me is like, "No, I don't really feel anything."
Mm.
Uh, what was so interesting about this experience is, EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, seem to be the number one for most paranormal investigators. Those seem to be the number one type of way that we capture paranormal
Yeah.
evidence. And
Now, is
so,
there a specific individual that's better at capturing them with those devices in hand than other people, or is it just anybody who's got a piece of equipment?
yeah, usually for the paranormal group, we had pretty much everybody in the group who, were using audio devices had captured EVPs. So I don't think they were unique to anyone in the group.
Hmm.
But going back to that experience, I come stop dead in my tracks. And so, I felt that energy for probably about a minute or so, and then it was gone. And I'm going back and reviewing my voice recorder. And the moment I say I stop dead in my tracks, and I'm like, wow, I'm feeling, feeling some pretty strong energy here. I capture a male guttural voice that sounds like it's right next to the recorder.
Hmm.
And it's like this loud groan. And I mean like a second after I stopped and said I was feeling that energy. And so
Yeah.
it was backed up with evidence.
Yeah, it's
And
good.
that's happened probably on three or four different occasions where I'm feeling energy and then something happens or I capture something on audio.
Yeah, that's
And
good. And you've got like a second thing to back up on. I mean, obviously capturing. Have you had any of these analysed? These recordings? I mean, do you know what frequencies or anything are coming in on, like the human vocal frequencies and things?
we have done some analysis as a group and some frequency analysis. And some of these who are that come in at low frequency, and I know there's a range, there's a frequency range typically that, human voices,
Hmm.
come through at. And some of those have come in a little bit on that low end of the frequency
Yeah,
spectrum.
I thought so. I thought so.
Yeah.
Sometimes these frequencies which they're generating is sometimes beyond the equipment's capability should be to be recording it. I mean, the most recording equipment is going to fall into the manufacturing range of 20 to 20,000 hertz of human hearing. They don't tend to make them outside those parameters because we wouldn't really hear them. But
Yeah.
what's really strange is that we can hear these recordings on these devices, but when analyzing them, sometimes they're below 20,000 hertz. And you think to yourself, well, how did the equipment record it then? And that's what's so fascinating about paranormal acoustics, because it isn't simply that, that it's just like a human vocal. Sometimes they don't show the frequencies of human vocals. But yet we hear them on these devices, which indicates, I think, that most of these things are being somehow placed onto the recording devices rather than the normal method of the actual recorder picking it actually up out of the harmonics of the air like we would do with our normal speech, which again we start getting into sort of paranormal physics, and it starts getting really hairy then, because it seems that there's an area of study there where you start to realize nothing really of what they're producing falls under the normal characteristics of harmonic sound, and yet we hear it. And that's what's so fascinating about these about the subject of paranormal acoustics. It fascinates me.
Yeah, I mean, I think just off the back of that, actually, Corey. I mean, you mentioned about feeling energy, and you can this particular time you stopped you in your tracks, and you mentioned about electromagnetic energy and frequencies and how they can alter a person's perception. So, I mean, two things really. Some people, particularly skeptical people, would say that these ghosts are just electromagnetic frequencies, and that's what is altering people's minds, what they're feeling, what they're seeing. But others would say that this electromagnetic frequency is a result of this manifestation of energy in the first place. And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, like Steve said there about, you know, are these recordings placed on the recorder? I mean, is it possible that, to put it in layman's terms, if somehow, yeah, how would you say, converting it into sound and audio that we can hear? I mean, what are your thoughts on this through your, analytics that you've done on these type of recordings?
Oh boy. We've had lengthy discussions, me and a few people in the paranormal group about EVP and what exactly is going on here, just as you alluded to, and so did Steve. Uh, in discussions like if they're spirits and they don't have vocal cords like we do, sound is pressure waves.
Hmm.
And, you're they go into the ear canal and, they're picked up by the hairs inside our ears and that all that. If this is somehow bypassing that process and you know, completely going around that and we're still hearing it, how are we hearing it? And that's what's so fascinating
Yeah.
about this.
Absolutely.
So
We've,
the
yeah.
the 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 other thing that we found about EVP is they're highly directional.
Yes.
So we can have a recorder, and we've done this in many locations, where we have one recorder on one side of the room and the other, and they're pointing towards each other. Maybe 10, 15, 20 feet apart. One recorder will pick up the EVP and the other one will not.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that possible?
It is.
How
It
is
is. It's
how
so
is
strange.
it
Yeah,
is?
it is. I mean,
How is
we've done tests like this where we actually had Olympus, who make audible equipment recorders, join us, the tech team, to on this specific studies, these experiments, and we had three identical model Olympus. It was the DM60, I think it was, and the DM670s, owned and created by Olympus. And we had three of these identical model recorders running in for short durations of time right next door to each other in a silent environment. And we would get variations. One recorder would record something completely different than the other recorder, and yet we never heard anything at the time. Olympus was stumped to try and explain how their recorders can do that. Which led to further tests where the actual microphone recording head was taken out of some of this equipment and they still managed to record. And so we knew that it wasn't relying on parts of the equipment, such as the recording head, to be picking up harmonics because it didn't need it. And yet it was still on there in analog form and in digital log form. So it can cross both boundaries. And this is where we started getting into sort of those, what we refer to as paranormal mechanics, because we're really trying to figure out, we know we're capturing audible phenomena, but it's the mechanism of how it's delivered. It's fascinating, even to people, because maybe people themselves are instruments and they can be targeted just like a piece of recording equipment to hear something. But then the person next to them might not hear it. So it's like, you could say, well, is it telepathic? Are you hearing it in a telepathic sense? We refer to it in parapsychological circles as transplacement, but it's the same thing. It's like being hearing it from inside. It's delivered to us. You're hearing it in your head, or you hear your mother's voice over your shoulder, and yet other people around don't hear it. It is so profound, but there's an actual area of study there. It really does need expanding on.
Yeah, no, I could completely agree with that. I mean, just off the back of that, then, Steve, to be perfectly honest with you, like you were talking about, certain people will hear things, certain people will see things. It's much the same in the UFO field as well.
Mm.
You'll have people tell you that some people can look up and see a UFO, and a guy or girl so next to him, 5 yards away, you'll see
That's it.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So it's all. But I mean, so what are your thoughts off that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Corey? Have you experienced anything like that? I mean, you alluded to it yourself anyway earlier, where you said, different members of the team would experience things differently. So, what do you think the reasons are for that? Do you think that's just a matter of personal perception? Do you think, we spoke to a chap called Nick Kyle several weeks ago, and he was talking about the more you experience things, the more open your mind becomes to such possibilities. So, are some people just further along than others, and is that why they may perceive things? What are your thoughts on that? If indeed you've had any on that kind of thing.
Well, that's a great question. That's really a really good question. I think, it kind of goes along the lines of some people seem to have more psychic or mediumship type abilities than others. If you would have asked me, did I believe in psychics and mediums, over 10 years ago, I probably would have rolled my eyes
Yeah, I'm going to
and
say
said,
something on
yeah.
this soon. actually. Yeah.
So, yes, I'm absolutely a firm believer that we, I mean, this can get pretty deep. I mean, if you want to go along the lines of talking about consciousness and what is consciousness, and is consciousness all in here, or is it external as
Mm.
well? And our brain's a receiver and transmitter for receiving, outside signals, and it's not all just right here. Um, I mean, you could really, really get deep with these discussions, but to hopefully, at least at some level, to try and answer your question because it's a difficult one. I
Yeah.
do think that people sense things differently. And I think some people, it's kind of like I like to liken it to a radio. Those
Mm.
old analog
Yeah.
radios where you
Yeah,
have to turn the knob and dial it to a certain frequency. Maybe certain people are tuned to a certain frequency that others are not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah,
you mentioned some people experiencing things and others not experiencing things. I've been in locations where one member of the group says, "Did you just hear that?" And they hear something.
there
To
it
them,
is. Yeah.
it's what we would call a disembodied voice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The rest of us are like, well, we didn't hear it. And then we're going back again and reviewing audio. And this has happened a number of times where somebody says they heard something and all of a sudden it shows up on audio.
Yes.
And we're like, oh, wow.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That is interesting when those things happen. And of course, we've had times when it's been reversed. We've had a team of people and we heard a woman's voice in the next room and we clearly could hear what was said. And we said, look, don't repeat it to each other. Write it down what you heard. And we all heard the same thing. But the recording devices which were around didn't record it. And yet three people heard the same thing. So we know that there are variations in about what's going on, about how they deliver sound to us in the environment, or both, or not. There's this manipulation, and even to the point where something fell off the wall and it generated a tremendous sound of 62 decibels. When replicating that, when we came into the room, we found this object on the floor. We knew where it come from, so we just replicated it, dropped it from the wall. Only 32, 31 decibels. It was amplified the sound. Now we know that it wasn't thrown hard because the item was only plastic and it would have broken if it hit the floor with force. But the sound was amplified, literally doubled, to capture our awareness of the incident. So there's even that manipulation of even sounds in the environment. It's so strange, power acoustics. But there are a number of little things that you can do. I mean, there are some really good pieces of equipment. And I don't know if do you actually set up equipment and leave them in certain areas, Curry, like blanket monitoring with certain equipment as well?
Yes, and it's primarily just cameras and audio devices,
Right. Well,
digital
yeah,
voice
well, that's kind
recorders.
of yeah, that's kind of thing. There was a good little practice what we used to do. We used to take some mirrors with us, and we used to do what we refer to as psychomantium testing. But basically, what we're doing is that if we want to record this room behind me, we wouldn't point the camera on a tripod, point it at the room where we want to record. We point it at the mirror which we took with us, and the mirror reflection was recording it. And it was quite interesting that we used to get more responses, more visual captures on camera through psychomentium testings than we actually did by just pointing the camera into the room. There's something about mirrors as well. It's
Yeah.
sort of, it's strange, but it's definitely worth doing those types of tests because it turns up some real good evidence sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I don't know if you got any thoughts on that, Craig. I also want to come back to the medium thing in a minute. But have you got any thoughts on that with mirrors? Because it is quite a mystical, sort of thing, really, to put it bluntly.
yeah, that's one that I have not experimented
Give
with,
it a
but
try, Curry. You never know. You might just. I know we might want to record a room,
Mm.
but there are other methods, such as instead of recording at the room, let's turn the camera right round and point it at the mirror, which is reflecting at the room. So really, you can zoom in, and to the camera it just looks like you're just filming the room, but you're not. You're actually filming through reflection, and it does act differently sometimes. So it's definitely worth trying those tests. Absolutely,
Yeah, I mean the mirror thing's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a long history there with it. But I mean,
there is.
I know a lot of paranormal investigators will say that it's easy to catch things in reflections and stuff of that nature. So I mean, that's a topic we can go off on. But Corey, I want to go back onto the. You mentioned it, and it's relevant because this kind of happened to me recently. This you mentioned about if he'd have asked you if you believe in psychic ability, mediumship, spirits 10 years ago, your answer probably would have been drastically different to what it is now. Now, I've always had an open mind to the paranormal, but certain elements of it, particularly mediumship or so-called mediumship, and I'm not talking about people who, just kind of do their thing. I'm talking about people who put on shows and things like that, and they make a lot of money from it. I've always been very skeptical of this. Recently, however, my wife went to see a medium, and I won't mention his name because I'm actually speaking to him right now about what was said and
Oh
hoping
right.
to speak to him and stuff like that. Not in a nasty way, but he said some stuff, because usually she'll come back and she'll say, oh, he said this, he said that. And I said, well, he could have got that from here, from there. He'd explain it all away. Okay. This time it blew my mind. The stuff that he came out with, that there's just no way on earth. And I've really racked my brains with this for days now, longer than that even. There's no way on earth he could have known this. And I won't go into detail because like I said, I'm speaking to him. I'd like to probably write about it at some point. One of those things are involved in animals. So who passed over basically. So, Curry, I mean, two questions really. What are your thoughts on mediumship in terms of people who believe that they are literally in touch with spirits, whatever those spirits may be, and they have a spirit guide? And is that something you've come across? Is that something you've got an opinion on? And secondly, and I know it's going to sound very strange, but it's something that interests me, especially over the last year or so. Is what are your thoughts on animals having spirits? Have you ever experienced that where you might have come across the ghost of an animal? I mean, I know
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds very bizarre, but there's more people who claim to have had these experiences than you
Yeah.
think. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Chloe?
Okay, well, I'm going to address the second part of your question first,
Okay.
because the moment you mentioned that, I thought about an experience I had at home. So, yes, I do believe that animals sometimes come back and visit us, and I have a firsthand experience of this.
Mm.
So we had two small dogs that both passed away that we had to have put down, and about this happened probably about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and I was walking out of the bathroom and just had come out of the shower, put my clothes on, was walking out of the shower, and we have hardwood floors in our hallway and in our kitchen. And suddenly I hear this sound, tink, 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 going all the way down the, sound like it went all the way down the hallway. And it
Mm.
was the exact sound you would hear when your dog's nails are hitting the hardwood floor,
Yeah.
as they're walking down the hallway.
Hmm.
Um, that probably happened for that sound was probably I heard that for probably a good 10 to 12 seconds, just sounding like one of my dogs running down the hallway and their nails hitting. Now, I don't know what else I could explain that could have made that sound for that duration. Um, the
Mm.
only thing that I can explain for that, what I'd heard was one of my dogs and their nails hitting the hardwood floor. So that happened to me. And I had another synchronicity with one of my older dogs
Okay.
that also happened. Now, I can't say that it was very strange. It was a very strange synchronicity. But the one in the hallway where I sound like my dog was running, one of my dogs was running down the hallway, was pretty remarkable because I'd heard other people share stories where they're sitting on the bed after their animal had passed away, and it feels like, there's a little dip in the bed, and their
Yeah, yeah,
animal used to,
yeah.
whether it's a cat or it's a dog, used to get up on the bed all the time. Um, who
Mm.
knows? Maybe
I
there's
mean,
something to that.
just
But
to jump in before you answer the second part of the question, just because again, what you're saying is really relevant. this did involve a dog, and I won't go into details again. But one of the things I've said to my wife over the past few months is sometimes, like my dog Walter was sadly passed away. He used to nudge you with his nose. And there's been a few times over the months I've really thought I've felt him, and I thought it's your imagination, blah blah blah. And it's like half a dozen times this, and I've even said this to Tracy. The wording is pretty much exactly. I think it's him, but it probably isn't. I think it's imagination. One of the things that this guy said to Tracy is, when you think it's me, it is. And I just thought, how on earth? There's exactly the phrase that I use to Tracy. And so whenever I feel like there's a nudge there, I was just, I just dismiss it. So I just like, yeah, again, I completely believe you, because I didn't think about this until the last few months, but I think I've experienced that. And like you say, when you start researching it, and I've no doubt what you heard in your way was, like you say, your dog, because you know that sound, and you know your sound of your own dog as well. So sorry to interrupt you there, Cubby. Yeah, but yeah, carry on. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Getting to the other part of your question,
Yeah.
which is hopefully, and I'm not sure I remember it fully. It was dealing with psychics and mediums,
Yes, right.
and uh, maybe if you can repeat what exactly
Well,
it
it's
was. I know it
basically,
was.
I mean, I was always skeptical, and still am to a certain degree, of psychics and mediums who, are a bit flamboyant to make a lot of money and things of that nature. I tend to believe more low key ones, but after this experience, I'm a little bit more less skeptical. So I really wanted your thoughts on, what are your thoughts on things of that nature? Can people communicate with those who have passed on? Have you experienced anything like that? And your thoughts on, like, let's say, spirit guides and that kind of thing. What do you think they might be?
Yeah, it's another great question. I've had, when I did the podcast show, I had so many different guests on there that
Mm,
were either, in the psychic medium realm, uh, people who had near-death experiences,
right.
those sorts of things, and just all of the different types of phenomenon we've even touched on already, leads me to believe, one, that it's a much more mysterious universe than what we were, led to believe as we were growing up. Um, as far as psychics and mediums, I think that there's differing people who have differing levels of abilities. I think some maybe are more in tune than others are. Uh, I know that there was one particular guest on my show, Melinda Williams, who has actually assisted law enforcement in solving cases based on her abilities for a number of different times. Um, and so the more I researched her and the cases she's worked on and how she's helped law enforcement, to me, it is just absolutely remarkable that she's been able to help families get closure in cases that she's worked on with law enforcement. She's actually doing a YouTube show now, which is pretty amazing. But she's actually helped solve some of these cases, to find missing people, helped law enforcement to actually solve some of these cases. And to me, that's
Mm.
evidence right there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, to have some sort of, some of these cases are cold cases
Yeah, yeah,
where, police are just kind of at a standstill, law enforcement, and she's kind of helped them, you know,
Yeah.
solve some of
yeah,
these missing person cases. And it's quite fascinating. So yeah, I do believe there's something to it. Do I believe they're all legitimate? Probably not. Do I think some are just in it to make a quick buck and are probably don't have all the abilities they claim they have?
Mm.
Yeah, I think there's some imposters out there. Do I think there's some legitimate ones? Yeah, absolutely, I do. I've never worked. The interesting thing is I've never worked. Now we've had a few people in the paranormal group that I worked with for a number of years that were empaths, sensitives. I don't know if I would go as far as calling them psychics or mediums, but people that just seem to be more
mhm,
in touch with things that were going on. So things that happened on investigations, and with one particular person I'm thinking of that was in the group, have been validated
Mm,
by, either evidence we've captured or experiences other people have had investigating with this person. And so that has all led me to believe, yes, there is something to this, and that maybe perhaps we all have some of these abilities, but maybe some of us are just not as in tune with it as others are. Maybe
mm,
we're kind of the way we're raised, especially in Western society, is that,
Mm,
we've really been taught to believe that if you're not actually having an experience that is with your traditional five senses, then it's probably not real, right? It's that kind of that,
yeah.
metaphysical kind of indoctrination, if you will,
yeah.
that we have and that we're raised into. And anything else is perhaps our imagination or just speculative at best. And
Mm,
so, um, this journey for me has really opened me up to all kinds of different types of phenomena. And I want to touch back onto the near-death experience
Okay.
phenomena. When I did the podcast show, I had three or four different guests on that had had near-death experiences. And then I had another guy, and his name will come to me. He is a physician, and he and his wife have done thousands and thousands of cases of research. They have a website, and they've done, research on thousands and thousands of cases. And there does seem to be something to near-death uh, experiences and that
mm,
phenomena, and
for
that
sure. Yeah.
people have physically died, and
Mm,
you know, they've come back and they've actually recounted conversations going on the operating table, and
Mm,
they were clinically dead and
mm,
somehow were brought back. That's the other thing that fascinates me is the brain is there's a neurosurgeon, not the same guy that I just mentioned, Eben Alexander, who wrote a book about this.
mm,
He was a complete skeptic about all of this, and then he had a near-death experience and wrote a book about it, and is thoroughly convinced that near-death experiences are a real thing because he
mm, mm.
experienced one himself. But people have brought back abilities that they never had before.
yes.
I mean, one gentleman I had on the show, he was actually from the UK. I believe his name's David Ditchfield. You may have heard of him.
Right.
Hmm.
Came back with an ability to write music suddenly.
Yes.
Um, which he never had any formal music training, never played an instrument. All of a sudden, he was writing or doing paintings and stuff like that. So either it opened up a side of his brain that was never there before, but of all the phenomena out there, if you were to ask me what is the most compelling to me, aside from doing paranormal investigation, I would say it's near-death experience. What I
Yeah,
believe is happening.
fascinating, Corey. I mean,
It's
you are
crazy.
right. There's a huge amount, a wealth of information now that demonstrates the evidence of out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences and those sort of things. Very credible stuff. So it's still being very much debated. The scientists are trying to examine, and trying to understand about the human brain, but everything kind of leads to expanded consciousness. And
Yeah.
if that's the case, then we're not dealing with something which is a physical, tangible thing, because some people have been dead for 40 minutes, when they've been in water or in cold water and stuff. And yet they've been revived and had near-death experiences. And yet, clinically, the brain would be dead after a certain length of time. But they recall these incidents, and what they're actually pushing for, they're saying, well, maybe it lies outside the brain in some type of consciousness that we have, expanded consciousness. There's so much more to learn about these
Mm,
topics, but we are endeavoring to try and find out as much as we possibly can. Because not only is the world of the paranormal a mystery, but even though the human brain, is still somewhat of a mystery, we're still trying to figure out, what it all means,
yeah.
because we're always coming across things where it just doesn't fit the bill. And it's like anything in science, it's okay at the time, until it gets proven wrong. And this is what science has always been. It's a development, and we wouldn't be where we are now if we hadn't been wrong before to get to where we are. So,
Yeah.
we are trying our best. Obviously, there's lots of parapsychological departments and psychology departments looking into the pattern of sleep. What's going on in the brain when it's more active whilst we're sleeping, when awake, and so many other things like that. And what's its link to the paranormal, because there is sometimes a link with paranormal. You mentioned, Corey, about people coming back with these new zests for life or new abilities, being able to write music. I mean, I can't write music. I wouldn't even know where to begin to write music. So where is that information? How have I learned that information? If I've got it consciously somewhere in my brain, is it from a past life, or do we tap some type of akashic record and we just tap in and we know all and everything? And sometimes we bring some of those things back through near-death experiences. It really is profound, but that's why we like these subjects, isn't it,
Yeah.
Margaret?
I mean, I think a good thing to mention here, I mean, because you mentioned near-death experience, and a couple of weeks ago we spoke to a chap called Anthony Peake, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but if you're not, then check out everything he's ever written, seriously, because you will love it. One thing he was speaking about is consciousness, and he was saying that these interactions with these intelligences, whereas they're not real, they are real at the same time. To the point here, he was, and I don't want to put words in his mouth here, but he was basically saying that the brain is an inhibitor as much as anything else. It takes all the information in and it blocks out what it doesn't need or what it thinks you don't need. He was also saying through his research and through this, his readings and all the stuff he's been involved in, that the drug DMT can kind of block that. So all these readings and all this information actually then enters the brain and so enters your consciousness. You mentioned about near-death experiences. It's thought today, and I'm not sure if this is proven or not, but upon death, the brain is supposed to release DMT. And
Yeah.
so it makes me think that when people are having near-death experiences, that DMT is being released in preparation for death. And so they are perhaps then opened up to all this other consciousness. And you mentioned about frequencies and a radio. All this stuff's all around us all the time. It's just that we can't see it or hear it or sense it. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that the near-death experience, I think it is very valid, and I think it will go away to explain the paranormal. But do you think it's kind of not proof, but tentative proof or speculative proof that, you know, this paranormal activity that we're all experiencing around the world is much more to do with consciousness than anything else, really?
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, the number of cases when you look at near-death studies, and again, I'm unfortunately forgetting the gentleman's name, the doctor who him and his wife have done all this research. NDERF is the acronym, Near Death Experience Research Foundation. And again, I apologize, the name's just escaping me right now. He was on the podcast as well. That have done all these studies, and there are so many similarities from people across different socioeconomic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, you name it, that have had near-death experiences, that there are these similarities.
Mm.
A lot of similarities in cases that they've researched. And you wonder if all these people from all these diverse backgrounds have had these similar experiences. There's got to be something. There is a common thread amongst a lot of these cases.
Mm.
And, it seems to be one of them seems to be that, people, they have a near-death experience. And when they do have this experience, it doesn't seem to be, I know I'm on shaky ground here because I mentioned religion. Okay. And I know that's a sensitive subject for people,
Yeah.
uh, because, people expect to pass on and perhaps be judged, that sort of thing. And from all this research that's been done, it doesn't seem to be the case.
Mm.
It seems to be more about learning from whatever's happened in our life. It seems to be that, it's not so much about judgment. It's more about learning from the experience and taking away from each one. If you want to believe that we do live multiple lives, And that's all. Every life we live, we're here to learn something new, and we're here to perhaps have some sort of soul progression. If you want to believe that,
Mm.
uh, in my experience, there seems to be some validity to it based on all of the interviews, the research I've done on it. And so it's made this whole journey so worthwhile for me because, uh, it was not just about going out and trying to, that when people mention ghost hunting,
Mm.
uh, I think I've tried to get away from that, terminology because it seems to have a negative connotation to it in that
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
just thrill seeking. They're going out to, you know, scare themselves or, get a thrill out of doing it. Whereas paranormal investigating seems to be a little bit more encompassing. I mean, you're trying to be a little bit more objective, I'd say, in what you're doing, and have some evidence to take away, perhaps, that you can share with others. And so that's one of the reasons why. I mean, there's nothing wrong with people wanting to go out and
Yeah.
and ghost hunt and and do that sort of thing. But if you're in the field to do it to actually be more objective about it and try and have something to take away from it that is evidential, then I think that's where you step more into the paranormal investigating realm,
Mm.
which is kind of, I probably started more in what people would call ghost hunting. I think it progressed into more paranormal investigating. Now, am I a scientist? No, not even close. And so when I go out into an investigation, is anything that I capture going to be accepted by the scientific community? Probably not. Because they're going to say, can you, from a scientific perspective, they want something that's duplicatable, that they
Yeah.
can
Replicate. Yeah.
reproduce in a lab. And I can't do that,
No.
Mm.
Very rarely anybody can
Yeah,
do that in
we
a.
spoke about this
You know,
before,
you
haven't we?
can't do this with the paranormal. I mean, I've argued with parapsychological departments. I mean, it's like investigating the Arctic fox. You can't take the Arctic fox into a laboratory and expect it to act normal. It just doesn't work like that. And also, paranormal phenomena tends to rear its face out there in the real world as opposed from inside a science laboratory. And I think they need to sort of realize that, that's part of the mechanism of phenomena. It's evasive, hyper-evasive, sometimes elusive, deceptive, and it doesn't fall to the will of man, unfortunately.
Right.
If we do get replication, it's very, very lucky. So we do need that halfway house really between the scientific labs and what's going on in the real world. Somewhere in between, we need to sort of come together. And
Hmm.
this is the problem with scientific establishments. It's they like to do things their own way, and science doesn't. Paranormal doesn't fit into science like that. And they've got to understand that that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on what you mentioned there about like a human element. I mean, I think it's interesting you say that, you started off, more for not for the thrill of it, but just out of interest, really. And I think a lot of people start just out of interest. They just kind of want to know, and then it kind of morphs into something more serious. But we were speaking to Malcolm Robinson a few months ago now, and I was saying this, that basically you start off wanting to know about ghosts, wanting to know about the other side and aliens or whatever it might be. But, and you've kind of alluded to it already, the more you get into this, the more you're almost kind of investigating human consciousness and the human, what human existence is all about. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's pretty much where I'm at this point. I mean, I love all UFOs and aliens and God, I love all those stories and I love all the accounts. But essentially, I find myself thinking more and more about human consciousness, human existence, and how it relates to all these strange things. So, what are your
Mm.
thoughts on that, Corey?
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately, on the front end of this, I started trying to find out whether there was something about ghosts. And here I am come out the other end of this, just like casting my net much wider, right?
Yeah.
If you will, into all kinds of different phenomena. And Yes, absolutely. That's where it's led me. It's led me into all sorts of things and being open-minded about all sorts of phenomena. Whereas, again, if I step back over 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I wasn't open to all that kind of stuff. Now, I always, because of the experience I had with the UFO, I've always, that's where I really started, if you want to be honest. I always had kind of an interest in that subject because I actually had an experience that
Mm.
I was always wondering, could I say 100% that that was an alien spacecraft? No, not even close. But I don't know what it was. It certainly wasn't a helicopter.
Hmm.
There was no noise to it, and this thing just shot up, looked like it shot up out of the atmosphere. And me and my friend both saw it and looked at each other like, well, what in the hell was that? And again, I think that maybe that was just the precursor to me getting involved in all of this down the road because
Mm.
I had that experience and maybe it just maybe it opened me up a little bit to other
Yeah.
possibilities. And so, but now I come out the tail end of this just open to all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not somebody with psychic or mediumship abilities. Uh, Maybe a little bit what some might describe as empathic, if
Right.
you
Okay.
will, because I I do go into locations sometimes and I kind of feel energy, whether it's something bad happened at a location or whatever. Sometimes, you just kind of have certain feelings, and sometimes we went into locations not trying to know too much
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
because
Good idea.
yeah, you don't want to taint yourself or, go in with preconceived notions. And every location's been different. Sometimes we go in with a little bit of historical background. Others we went in with less of that
Mm.
on purpose. For
Yeah.
me, paranormal investigating's always been um, it's always been about experimenting and trying
Yeah.
different things. So
Trying to
whether it
advance
be
the
the
subject. Yeah. Trying to get forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether it's the Singapore method, where you're trying to bring in trigger objects
Hmm.
to see if you can elicit responses. So there's a couple other things I wanted to mention. One is getting back to the subject of EVP.
Okay.
Um, the interesting thing about EVP is some of them tend to be pretty random, probably the majority of them, but there's that small percentage that seem to be intelligent and seem to be saying something or whatever you're getting, whatever that VP is, seems to be aware of what you are doing and they
Yeah.
seem to be responding to you. Uh, there is one particular location that we investigated. People, as a group, we probably investigated this location close to 100 times. Now, I myself have probably only investigated, and that location is no longer available to us, unfortunately. It's kind of the place that we'd always go back to because if you want to say, it kind of run the gamut of paranormal experiences you could have there, that was the place. Whether it be people had saw apparitions, been touched, disembodied voices, many, probably the totality of EBP that we had captured at that location was in the thousands.
Right.
And so, uh, just so many different types of things going on. Phantom voices, disembodied voices, phantom noises going on in the building. So many things going on. Even a couple of times, people saying what some would say would be like poltergeist type
Mm.
Okay.
activity, something moving. I never experienced it myself, but there's a few members of the group claiming that that did happen. And so, um, battery drains is another
Oh yeah.
very strange one. We would go into the location with, brand new batteries, charged batteries in our equipment, and we'd go in there and, the batteries would just drain. And you look at your camera and it's like, oh, it's dying. I just charged it, you know. what's going on. That happened a number of times. But just the number of different things that happen at that one location was pretty remarkable. Now, there were times when we go to the location and nothing would happen, or maybe one thing would happen all night, and then you go another time and, five or six things would happen, and you're like, why is this? That's the other thing that's been so strange to me about the paranormal is, and I think, Steve, you already alluded to it, it responds when it wants to respond.
Yeah.
Or it
Yeah.
it's got a mind of its own, and it's not like they're the spirits or whatever that's interacting with us. It's on their own terms, it seemed to be,
Yeah.
not on our terms.
That's it.
And
That's exactly it.
and that's what's so frustrating. So there's kind of two sides to it. In one sense, it's really fascinating because of that, and in another sense, it's really frustrating as a paranormal investigator because you can go into a location and you're trying to interact and you're trying to do things to connect, whether
Yeah.
it be you're bringing in uh, objects, trigger objects, as we like to call them, that you think they may have interest in. And sometimes they work, and a lot of times they don't work.
Mm.
And you think, well, what do we need to do to
Yeah.
be able to elicit activity here or to get responses? And
Exactly. And Corey, that, when we see these television shows where all hell breaks loose the first 10 minutes that you're in there, it's entertainment, because as well as I do that, you can spend a whole week in sometimes in a place and maybe not get anything. It can be that elusive. It doesn't just all hell break loose 10 minutes into a TV show. I mean, of course, I understand that they got to try and capture the entertainment side of things, but the realism of paranormal investigation can be a bit boring sometimes, to be honest with you. You kind of sat around, it's a bit like fishing. You sat around waiting for something to bite, and sometimes it
yes.
doesn't.
If you've ever played golf, and
Yeah,
you've struggled with the game of golf,
yeah,
you know
yeah,
that you can have those three or four great shots in a round, and
yeah.
the rest of the round is like, well, that was crap, and it's those few shots that keep you coming back.
It
You
is.
hit a few great drives, or you go fishing and you catch that nice, good size trout, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, I got skunked most of the trip, but I caught that one really nice trout. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah, it's like those
It
few
really is.
experiences that you do have keep you coming back, and you just
Yeah. And
you want
now,
to experience
w-
more.
what area are you in, Corey? Are you in Utah, did you say?
Yes, correct. I'm in northern
Okay.
Utah, so
Yeah.
about 30 miles north of Salt Lake City.
Okay. So
And
I know Utah. I've been to Utah. So is there a specific place or investigation you would love to go? And I mean, if it's like a dream location you would really like to get your team into?
uh, well, are you talking specifically to Utah or just anywhere?
Well, I mean, is there something that comes to mind where you've always thought, do you know what, that would be the place I'd love to go and investigate?
There are so many locations. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I have a bucket list of locations that, you know, if if money were not an option, and
Yeah.
if family, constraints were not there, places that I would love to go. There's a few of them that are at the top of my list. Penhurst in Pennsylvania is one that
Penhurst. I
I
knew
would.
you were going to say Penhurst. I've been to Penhurst myself. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That is
Um,
some place.
in the UK, all the castles and all the
Oh,
places you
yeah.
can go over there. I would really love to go over there. We had a member of our group that was from the UK that was here for a while. Very, very interesting fellow. And he was kind of our equipment guy,
Yeah.
our techie guy. He was a double E, electrical engineer, and went back to the UK, and he's still there now. He has investigated like all these different kinds of castles and all those kind of places. And yeah, I would love to come to the UK,
Yeah.
Scotland. There's so many
Yeah.
different places
I
that
tell
I
Yeah.
you
just
what, Curry,
love
if you
to.
find yourself in the UK, I'm not sure whether your techie guy will agree with this, but you want to be looking at public houses. pubs, they're
Yeah.
some of the most haunted buildings, and they stretch back some of them 1,000 years. You know, not all by any stretch of imagination,
Yeah.
but you will find and York is a specific place where you will find
Oh yeah.
so many haunted public houses. So I would certainly recommend that.
Yeah, we're very lucky, aren't we, Marcus, I suppose. I mean,
In
we
terms of
don't
history,
we just don't really we take it for granted that we probably live in probably the most haunted country on
certainly
the
one of.
on the world.
Mm,
And we are spoilt for choice. You know,
absolutely.
and yet, how many I've been to the US so many times investigating. It's like strange. It's like, well, why can't you just stick to your own home?
It's just so many
Yeah.
questions. I mean, Corey, we're going to have to wrap this up shortly, which is a shame because I feel like there's so much we could talk about. But I'd like to get your opinion on, for example, is all this stuff connected? Whether it's UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, poltergeists, and that connection could be whether it's all part of the same intelligence or maybe it's a part of the same mechanism that allows these things to manifest. But the reason I'm going to ask you this is you mentioned about near-death experiences, which are very similar to out of body experiences. Again, literally leaving the body, looking down. And I'd like to bring alien abduction into this as well, because although, it's speculative, you've got the approaching a light, for example, but nobody recalls passing through this light. They just recall waking up in a room, which is often brightly lit. So a lot of the near-death experiences are not exactly like that, but it's very similar. Again, alien abduction researchers will say that alien abduction could be an out-of-body experience because people are taken, but the partner sleeps beside them and just doesn't even realize they're missing. Or the UFO that's supposedly hanging over their home, nobody sees it, even though it's a busy road. So, do you think we'll find one day that there is a connection between all this stuff? Because, as you said, the paranormal, all it means is stuff that's not explained. So, you would think that there would be some kind of connection between whether it's UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, poltergeists. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I never really did you know, I find the cryptozoology subject fascinating too. And, I had guests on when I did my podcast show as well that were cryptozoologists or researchers of Bigfoot. Um, many UFO researchers.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there is some sort of relationship between all of this.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the universe trying to remind us that we're not as smart as we think we are,
Yeah.
right? And that there is more going on than that our minds can even perceive.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I almost feel like that's the universe trying to tell us that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, so whether it's a synchronicity, whether it's a UFO experience, and yeah, as I've delved into the UFO subject, read many books. And again, I guess that's where this kind of started for me. Going back to Roswell and all these other UFO cases and there seems to be some sort of, I don't know if you want to call it interdimensional
Yes,
aspect of this.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Perhaps even a spiritual aspect to this. And it's so many layers to that. It's like peeling back an onion. And
Yeah.
I always say you can go so deep in the rabbit hole just on the UFO subject
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've had researchers on who believe that the Bigfoot phenomena, and if you go back to the Native Americans believe that the Bigfoot phenomena there was a spiritual aspect to it.
Yeah.
As crazy as that may sound to some people, because there's always going to be people out there going to say, well, that just sounds nuts. And there does seem to be, and again, the Native Americans believe there was a spiritual aspect to the Bigfoot phenomena. Again, I just think there is all this stuff kind of ties in at some level.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It really
that's what
does.
makes it so interesting
Yeah.
is because there's so many rabbit holes that you can go down as you start delving into this stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely
You
right.
think,
I mean,
oh,
Steve,
really?
sure you agree. We speak about
I
this
totally
regularly.
agree. I totally agree. The more you
Absolutely.
actually work and look at the connections between all these various phenomena, the more connections you find between them, which shouldn't be there and yet are there. And this is what we're trying to deal with. We're trying to look at the whole picture, take away the boxes so that it's not just ufology, it's not just paranormal, supernatural, and cryptids. Just collapse the compartmentalization, get rid of all the boxes because we had paranormal guys that were into UFOs and UFO guys not into the paranormal. And sometimes you've got these crossover incidents, and you think, well, you're not going to conclude because you're not looking in the right area. And I think it is a good idea to just have get rid of that opinion, go get rid of that compartmentalization. Just look at the whole subject as a whole, and you start to see all these little connections, which fascinates me. And
Mm.
this is why we have now so many cases when you've got so multiple, the various different topics within it called high strangeness, and because these locations exist around the world, and they consist of your cryptids, your paranormal, your UFOs, the whole shebang. And that's when it starts getting very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Hey,
have you got
just
any thoughts on that, Curry?
well, yeah, just 2 hours east of here, you've got Skinwalker Ranch,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I don't know if you guys have had a chance to catch the show,
yeah, yeah,
The Secret of
I've been
Skinwalker
there.
Ranch. Oh
Yeah,
wow, yeah,
yeah,
cool. I wish I could go sometime, but I don't have. I'm not an insider, so but just the number of different types of strange things they've experienced just on that location alone
yeah,
is absolutely mind blowing, and
yeah.
that goes to exactly what we're talking about here. There's so much strangeness going on there, and it makes you wonder how it's all interrelated. They pretty much have it all going on there, whether
yeah,
it's
Yeah.
UFOs, cryptozoology. I mean, if you want to get into the skinwalker
yeah.
aspect, I know some people think that that's just Native American lore. There's
There's a bit more
so
to it than that. Yeah,
yeah, there's so much going on there.
yeah. People do claim to see it. The Navarro Rangers, which are good
Yeah,
friends of
yeah.
them, they experienced it firsthand.
See, there's
Um,
also a blind frog ranch, isn't there, Steve, as well, which is just round the corner.
Blind Frog
There's
Ranch. There's
much
actually a lot.
bizarre activities, you know.
Thunderclap Ranch. There's Flatbed Ranch. There's Clearview. And if you just come away from the ranch lands, start getting into the Meadow Project, which is Trey Hudson's work, which is great. And the places all over it. We've got them in the UK, Bempton area, which is a high strangeness. It's like Skinwalker Ranch, but in the UK. We have places in, the Emsky Triangle in Russia. These places exist all over the world, but it's referred to as high strangeness. It's just so profound. You don't know where to start investigating because you got all sorts of strange, different things, and you really start getting your head into a bit of a spin trying to understand what's going on here. And it must be a huge mechanism at play for all those things to sort of be taking place in one location. And that's what makes it good entertainment, of course, because, when you're doing a TV show around these locations of high strangeness, you just don't know what to expect sometimes. Anything can go, really.
I mean, one last thing, Corey, regarding locations, actually, then, before we do wrap this up. Where you are in Utah, you're part of the Four Corners, essentially, with Colorado, Nevada. I forget the other one now, actually, there's a fourth one. I'm sure you know it. It might be Arizona. So, how important are locations? Because clearly they must be. I mean, that Four Corners region, it's not only got cryptid activity, there's accounts of portals, like you mentioned, interdimensional, there's UFOs, are massive there. So, locations really are quite important to all of this. Specific locations that seem to, like Steve said, of high strangeness or intensities of energies. Um, Certainly being in Utah, have you ever any experience of the Four Corners at all? And what are your thoughts on?
Not Four Corners area is way down south from where I
Okay,
am. I've been to Sedona, Arizona. That's an
yeah,
interesting place. But some of the places I've visited the Gettysburg battlefield.
right,
Yes.
okay, yeah,
Yeah. I've
But
been there. Well, good.
this was before me getting involved in the paranormal. And I do think there's something to certain locations because of what's happened there in the past. And this goes back to me wanting to visit so many different places. It goes back to Eureka Springs.
Yep.
is a in Arkansas is a very interesting area. It's
Hmm.
an area with lots of quartz and limestone, and a lot of springs there, and you have to wonder whether that's a catalyst for
Yeah,
Yeah.
spiritual activity.
Rock and water. Yeah.
Um, right. So, is there something in the environment
definitely
that's a catalyst?
geological, I think, connections to some of this
Geological,
phenomena.
yes.
Yeah, definitely Eureka Springs. I did investigations. It's Bigfoot country. We're not too far from Boggy Creek, So I did that sort of investigated the Crescent Moon Hotel up in Arkansas as well, and they've got the biggest hornets I've ever seen. Literally, you know, yeah, they're warning. I'm more scared of the hornets than
Yeah.
anything else.
Quite possibly so, actually. Yes, it makes you think. Curry, look, we're going to have to let you go. We're going to have to wrap this up. So, look, thank you very much for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating
It
speaking
was
with you.
really good. I enjoyed this. Yeah.
Absolutely second
Yes, a
that.
lot of fun.
Before we let you go, do you have anything coming up? Is there anything you'd like to promote? Anything you'd like to tell people to read, to view? The floor's yours for the next 30 seconds, my friend.
Yeah, not a lot. I ended the podcast show a couple of years ago, so I'm not doing that anymore. The book is Walking in the Shadows of Strangers. It again, it is a journey into it really is my 10-year journey into the paranormal and what I experienced. So if anybody wants to get a copy of the book, it's on Amazon. And again, it's just, and I've had people reach back to me, not that many, but I've had a handful of people that said, "Hey, your book resonated with me. It was a great story." And I've had similar kind of experiences that kind of led me in, the same kind of direction. So even if it resonated with a few, it was worth it, I think.
Yeah. Good.
It's not a bestseller book.
Well,
Um,
we'll certainly be giving it a plug anyway, won't we,
Yeah,
Marcus?
it
You know
doesn't
what I mean?
need to be. I can recommend it. I
Mm.
recommend it again. You want to get hold of that, people, because it's a good book. I've read that myself, and it's a very good book. It's very interesting. So,
Mm.
Corey, look, thank you ever so much for joining us. Really, thank you. It's been a pleasure
Yes.
speaking with you, my friend. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Fully
Good to
enjoyed it,
see.
Corey.
Good to see you
Excellent.
again.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to see you and good to talk to you, Corey. So, and thank you guys for joining us. Make sure that you leave your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media. And obviously, check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further news, articles, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.